Hi, I'm Josh here for this session. I'm going to try to give you guys some useful tools throughout today that you guys can walk away from the presentation and start implementing immediately. To tell you a little bit about myself, I'm originally a music therapist. I went to Berklee College of Music, got a degree in music ed, music therapy, where I had the opportunity to work with some people with dementia. It was really eye-opening. If there's anything you leave with today, it's that somebody with dementia can still learn. They just learn a little differently than us. I'm going to share how that affects our care. From there, I became a researcher where I bounced between New York and Massachusetts, studying behaviors in dementia, and ended up going to Harvard Business School to study healthcare economics. Ended up not finishing my MBA program, but transferring into a program where I study non-pharmacological healthcare, which there's pieces of that type of study throughout today's presentation. Non-pharmacological interventions, such as fresh cut grass, for example. If you smell that, it can actually decrease depression by releasing oxytocin in the body. And we'll talk more about that. And then I started my doctorate work in osteopathic neuroscience. So this is where our bones, muscles, and joints actually shape our brain. For example, for those of you that work in a community, showers can be very difficult. So I get to study these behaviors. And one of the best tools was actually giving people a loofah. So for example, you give a loofah to somebody to wash, you provide dignity where that they actually have dignity and help with it. But in addition is when the water hits them, instead of them hitting the associate, creating a workman's comp claim, or somebody getting injured or frustration with the resident, they're going to squeeze that loofah or that sponge. When they do that, neurologically, the brain changes, releases melatonin, and actually relaxes the person and creates more successful shower. So those type of tools we're going to try to touch on throughout this presentation so you can walk away and implement immediately with your care staff or even care practices for a company. And now I just finished all my doctorate work in clinical gerontology and aging neuroscience. And I'm just writing my dissertation, which focuses on how the environment actually affects behaviors. And what I get to do is I dress up in a dementia simulation suit and I spend anywhere from 48 to 72 hours in the community. And I live like a resident. So I get to see things like the bright lights and what does that do to me, the frustration, anxiety that's created, and then how can we work with that? So we're going to jump right in. And the name of the presentation is Dementia. It's not a person's name. It's not my name. And it's really that we need to focus on people as people before the disease. And a lot of things can be avoided if we approach the person before the disease and make these predetermined assumptions. Because I would say 90% of the behaviors we see often are triggered by what we do or what's in the environment or the stimulation in the environment for that resident, whether it's overstimulating, people talk too fast like I do, all those different things. I also wanted to point out throughout the presentation, feel free to ask questions in the chat box. And then as I can, I'll try to answer them, but then I'll leave about 15-ish minutes towards the end to answer any questions that you guys might have, jumping right in. Let's see if this, it's not going to the next present. There we go. Okay, so dementia, there's a lot of misconceptions about dementia. A lot of healthcare professionals will say, oh, dementia and Alzheimer's, they're completely different. Actually, they're one and the same. Dementia is actually an umbrella term with signs and symptoms. And I always ask the question, I know you can't say it back to me, but I'm gonna ask for you to answer it out loud wherever you are. Is dementia a disease? If you answered yes, you're wrong. There's actually, it's not a disease per se, it's actually a group of symptoms or a syndrome. So it's things like executive functioning deficits. It might be language or attention deficits. Memory obviously is a big one that gets affected. So dementia is not a disease per se, but it's actually a group of symptoms. The best visual that I can give you is on the next slide, which is right here. And it's dementia is that umbrella. And underneath you have over 100 different types of dementia. A lot of people don't realize that. So the conditions that are causing dementia, things like Alzheimer's, vascular Lewy bodies, and frontal temporal. I want to slow down a little bit here because each of these types of dementia are so unique, especially for the four most common type. So if you have a pen handy, this is probably the part you would want to take notes to help you and your team. Alzheimer's disease is mostly makes up about 75% of all the population. That's why we see the most people with Alzheimer's disease. With this, it's a short-term memory deficit. So this is not remembering what I had for breakfast, maybe not remembering what I just did 5 minutes ago, or repeating back words. However, the success for these people is based in the past. So these people will remember 1930, 1940. Reminiscent therapy is fantastic for people with Alzheimer's disease. Uh, Definitely train your associates on their past history, because they'll be able to really spark a great conversation with them, be able to redirect behaviors the more they know about their past. The second one is vascular. Vascular is actually hallmarked by inconsistent symptoms. This is that resident that knows who you are one day, the next day has no idea who you are, but with consistency and routine, you see less dementia symptoms. Oftentimes, these are the families that come in and they say, my loved one's getting better, we're going to move them home. And in most cases, once you disrupt that routine, you see those inconsistent symptoms. It can be caused by TIAs, transient ischemic attacks, a limbic stroke, diabetes, AIDS, HIV. It can be caused by a number of things. It's the second most common type of dementia. The third is dementia with Lewy body. There's some controversy if this is the third or the fourth, but most reports are showing that it is the third most common type. The big hallmark, if you walk away with anything about Lewy body, is that it's characterized by severe hallucinations. These are people that shouldn't watch the news, because if they watch the news as a burning building or a shooting, they will actually perceive that as being reality. And it could be that their son was there, that their sister was there, that they're in that burning building. Also, these people shouldn't have animals that are living in a community with them later on or further in the journey, because they might mistake them as a skunk or a rodent. But just some tools for you, because I said you'll walk away with tools, is people with Lewy body will actually resist care if the caregiver is wearing black pants or black shoes. It's a really fascinating phenomenon. However, in a research study, it actually shows that people will resist care if they have dark colored pants or shoes with Lewy body. So I would suggest tan pants, white shoes are a really great approach for somebody with Lewy body that will let you get close in that intimate way to help with ADL care. Some other things too is you're going to see Parkinsonian shakes. There's some really cool technology that can stabilize the hand and have them put together. There's these fascinating gloves. They're about $5,000 a piece, so really expensive. The big thing, if you walk away with a Lewy body, besides the hallucinations, is that they mimic what they see. So they have something called a reflective gene or mirror neuron. We all have this, but it's heightened with Lewy body due to the Lewy body protein. This means if a caregiver is across the room and they're dusting, you might see this person mimicking that dusting. So I would suggest you want to put them around residents that are very independent. What I see most of the time in assisted livings and nursing homes is a person with Lewy body has a Parkinsonian shakes, they're having difficulty eating. We put them at a table where nobody's eating. They see nobody eating, so what happens is they don't eat themselves. So the best intervention is actually to put them at a table where people are eating. That will actually bypass parts of the brain, go right to the kinesthetic muscle development, where they'll actually start to eat all by themselves. So there are useful tools with Lewy body, and there's a whole slew more, but I don't want to slow us down too much. And then the fourth one is frontal temporal dementia. This is when it affects the frontal lobe. So personality, judgment, ability to keep a schedule. Also, regulation of what somebody says is processed in this part of the brain. So people with FTD will say whatever pops in their mind. They'll make prejudice comments, racial comments. They'll tell you not so nice things, and it's not that they mean it. It's just that their filters, they're just saying whatever pops in their mind. It will come across as rude, but not all the times is it rude. I would suggest to family members or communities, just get a card, and on the back print, please be patient with somebody with dementia. When you go out into the community, if they say something inappropriate or challenging somebody or starting a fight, you can slip that card right in front of them, and you can de-escalate that situation pretty quickly. And there's more things like routines, really important. These people love to organize things. You'll see OCD-like tendencies, so like matching shoelaces or different things that they can do. So that's kind of those four in a nutshell, but keep in mind there's over 100 different types of dementia, and dementia is not a disease itself. Okay, let's see, I'm answering anything if they pop up. Okay. Slow down. For all of you on this call that work with dementia, there's three primary parts of the brain I say you should really know. And I want to break some misconceptions first. Is usually I ask a question, but I can't get a response for you guys right now, is how many brains do we have? A lot of modern neuroscience actually shows you have three brains, not just the neurocortex, but your enteric nervous system, your stomach, also your neurovascular system, your heart. These are actually processing emotions, and they actually have neurons. So when you have those butterflies in your stomach, is it love or is it neuroscience? And some would argue that it's neuroscience. But here we're just going to focus on the primary neurocortex. These things you probably have heard for people that have a memory impairment, and you should really be aware of how they work. The hippocampus is the part of the brain that takes a memory, filters it, and stores it into long term. This gets damaged by most forms of dementia. So that means Alzheimer's disease, for example, you give me information, I don't filter it into long term. So that's why they don't remember what they had for breakfast. They don't remember dates, times, or specifics that's new information. However, the magic here is the amygdala, the little thing that looks like a nut. This part of the brain is sensory or emotional based knowledge, and it's shielded by most forms of dementia, so it does not get affected. This means people with dementia process their social landscape or their world through emotional based knowledge. This is how you make them feel, things that are unique or stand out, or giving them something worth remembering. So an example of this is, for me, I'm with residents on most days, is the residents I work with, the hippocampus is challenged. So they don't remember my name being Josh. They don't remember what I do for work. However, the amygdala is still intact. So what they do remember is a man that sings or talks too much. And that's how they remember. They remember their world on face value, or emotional based knowledge, how they react to something. This is why it's so key for caregivers. The first minute you wake that resident up will stick with them throughout the day. Research shows if you have a good interaction in the morning, you have less sundowning behavior. So making sure caregivers slow down, introduce themselves, don't startle residents or force them to wake up, allow them to naturally wake up, because those type of interactions is emotional-based knowledge, and that we will see ripple throughout the day. And then the last piece of the brain is the prefrontal cortex. That's this piece of the brain. It does get affected by many types of dementia, primarily frontal temporal dementia. And this is personality, judgment, ability to sequence things, which gets affected by many types of dementia. So those are the three parts. The hippocampus, which is dates, time, specific, procedural information, something repeatedly introduced, but does not get stored if it's damaged. Amygdala is sensory-based, how you make me feel. And then the prefrontal cortex is personality, judgment, ability to forecast and think of the future. So those are the parts of the brain I always suggest you should know. Here, it's just some fun food for thought, is the hippocampus literally looks like a seahorse, because in Latin, it's actually seahorse. But in the meaning of time, we're just going to move forward. Neurotransmitters. In the brain, you have these chemicals that help your brain communicate. There's some primary ones I love to cover. The big one is glutamate. This helps with learning and memory. With this, there's ways to trigger this that research is starting to indicate more and more. One is the smell of pine, cedar, or cedar wood. That smell, or that category of aroma, releases glutamate and can actually help with learning and memory. A lot of students, if they study by this smell and go take the test by that smell, it does a memory recall and allows them to hold more information. Some preliminary research is showing that people with dementia, if they have this smell during the primary part of their day, will have less sundowning and less confusion throughout the day. So even just having the smell of pine in your communities could really help. For the northern communities, I know that you guys are primarily in Alabama, but any pine trees or anything that you can introduce to, research is actually suggesting that's really good to decrease anxiety and depression being in nature. But also the smell of pine or cedarwood or rosemary actually fosters glutamate in the brain and can help with learning and memory. So some food for thought there. And the other ones we'll talk about a little bit later, like dopamine and serotonin, but not too much today. Here's another misconception. A lot of people think dementia is not reversible or curable, and in many cases it's not. But there are many cases that it could be reversible. So the non-reversible ones we've talked primarily already about: Alzheimer's, vascular, dementia, Lewy body, frontal temporal, PICS, and there's more. However, there's many reversible things like delirium or medication side effects. A lot of people don't realize that the medications we take for dementia sometimes have a reverse reaction and cause more medications to be needed. Legally, I can't talk about specifics, but the two primary ones for Alzheimer's is what you see is they're known as inflammatory drugs. So that will actually inflame your stomach, make you feel uncomfortable. So then before you know it, you're prescribed an anti-inflammatory, then you have 4 or 5 other medications that follow just to treat the side effect of that original medication. That is known as the medicine cascade effect, MCE. So you prescribe one medicine, you have side effects, you prescribe a list of other medications, and throughout that process, you actually compromise and sometimes make your dementia symptoms worse. So it's some food for thought, non-pharmacological versus pharmaceutical route. It affects people totally differently. So I just always say constantly revisit it. One thing doesn't work for all. Clinical depression can also make dementia symptoms much worse. So if somebody's anxious, has anxiety, we're going to see more dementia symptoms. Vitamin B12, there's many types of deficits in our bodies associated with vitamins. And if we are deficient in one of them, we might have dementia symptoms. Things like chronic alcoholism can also cause it, tumors, infections. We probably all know on this call what a UTI is, a urinary tract infection. Those can really make symptoms of dementia come right up front and center, so even for people without dementia. And then also anything in your stomach or your gut that gets affected, something called the vagus nerve wraps around that, provides nutrition to your brain. So anything like thyroids, kidneys, your liver, if any of those get damaged, you're going to see dementia symptoms. In most cases, if you start to treat that underlying issue, the dementia symptoms will go away as well. Okay, normal aging versus dementia. I always get this question because for years in gerontology, dementia was taught as part of the normal aging lifespan. It's not anymore. So dementia is truly an accelerated rate of cognitive decline. It's not normal aging. However, we will all have cognitive decline regardless of having dementia. For example, men develop neurons to their mid-30s, females develop neurons to the early 40s, and then we all slow down that process. So our minds will not be as sharp when we are 70 years old as they were when we were 40 years old. However, normal aging is forgetting your wallet, getting lost on a street that you might not be familiar with, forgetting to do something, or walking into a room and not remembering what you were going in there for. That's normal. What's not normal is putting the remote in the microwave, the keys in the trash, driving onto a highway and ending up 4 hours in the opposite direction that you were originally heading in, or getting somewhere and not knowing how to get home. Those should start raising some flags. However, it could be depression could create some of those, a UTI could create some of those. So don't always just jump to, oh, it's some type of dementia. Maybe it's a non-reversible dementia. Just keep in mind that there's influences that make us compromise our cognitive abilities at times. However, those are pretty big signs when you see things in the trash or the microwave that shouldn't be there, or the safety of that person is starting to get challenged, whether wandering out in public or doing things that they typically wouldn't, that puts them at risk. So one thing I said at the beginning was that people with dementia can still learn. And this is so true, and research keeps proving it, even though so many people will push back on me. But yes, research shows that people with dementia can learn on average, it takes them about 35 days. So how this process works is you remind the person to do something, routinely do it, and the reward is they do it themselves. I can't even count the number of residents that move into the communities I support. And after we really stay on top of residents, okay, we remind them to brush their teeth. We routinely do that for about 35 days. And the reward is we start to have residents, even though their disease is getting worse, still be able to brush their teeth for 5-6 more months. And it also makes the work for your caregivers less. It's kind of that principle, you put more time up front, and then you can back away and it will sustain for a longer time. For you and I, it takes about 21 days. For somebody with dementia, it's 35 days, 5 weeks on average. And keep in mind that that's kind of a swaying scale. So some people will be earlier, some people will be later. I'm going to give you a tool. So many people will come to me and say, that's not true. You cannot, somebody with dementia cannot learn. and that like blows my mind. But for you, you might run across that. And what I always say is residents, when they move into a social based community, assisted living or nursing home, if they sit in the same seat every day at lunch, those residents learn that that is their seat. That is a perfect example you can share that people with dementia can still learn. And one example is they sit in the same seat every day at lunch and they learn that that is their seat. So it is a misconception that somebody with dementia can no longer learn. They just learn differently. Here's another thing too. This is primarily for just Alzheimer's disease. There are currently no FDA approved medications that actually slow down the disease itself. They only mask symptoms. So how that works is you have some memory loss. Cognitively, you can't perform that well. And what happens is you take a medicine, it helps you perform for a while, but your pathology, the plaques, tangles, and the atrophy of the brain is still happening. So for you and me, to give an analogy, would be we're sick, we have the flu. We take an antihistamine, it gets rid of our runny nose, but we still have the flu. Uh, so there are no medications currently that actually slow down the disease process. They only mask symptoms. Being person-centered, and I just skipped one, so I apologize, is really focusing on the person before their disease. And the rest of today is actually going to give you some more tools, some stuff on color philosophy, things that you could start to implement immediately. But they still have a little bit more to give you before jumping ahead. Here's two terms. If you have a pen handy, they're definitely terms you want to research, Google, research them because they'll make your life easier. One is habilitation or habilitative. This is the focus that you focus on what the person can do, not what they can't. And in memory care, time and time again, it shows if you focus on what people can do, you can reinforce those skills for a longer period of time, because in many cases, we can't rehabilitate and get them to get skills back. And what this looks like is you might have a cooking group. And in that cooking group, one person can read from the cookbook, one person can pass out all the cooking utensils, another person's actually showing pictures of what's going to be cooked, and another person might only be able to have the dough in a bag and be squeezing it and smelling it. But what you're doing is focusing on what each person can do within that group to help them be successful. There's a lot of training around habilitation on how to focus on what people can do. Like if they can hold a blanket, then have them included in helping make their bed. Those type of skills will remain for a long time if they're reinforced. The other word is retrogenesis, and it makes me sound smart for a big word, but it's really simple. It's retrogenesis is you develop skills or emotions in life, you develop dementia, then you lose those in order opposite. So what that looks like is, looking at the lifespan, you have Mrs. Smith. She has child 1, child 2, child 3. She develops dementia. Then what happens is she forgets child 3, she forgets child 2, and in most cases, a person with dementia will revert to their eldest child as the person they remember the most. So now you just saw they accumulated, got dementia, and lost the information in order opposite. Another example is think of children. Think of the emotional states that make them happy. Holding hands, holding a teddy bear, giving hugs and kisses. Things that kids love, right? That all reverts back to somebody with dementia. But the problem for you and me is how do we make it dignified? And that is, okay, they're not going to be carrying around a teddy bear, but maybe it's a fake baby, or maybe it's a pocketbook, something that they need to hold. So think of those things that comfort a child. Those things will very much come back and comfort the seniors. For example, COVID, we have a little study going on right now. And in COVID, the human interaction got pulled away. And as we know, children really need that human touch and hug. So we actually just started introducing some visits safely with COVID protocols. And immediately we've had people on hospice bounce back and aren't even on hospice just by getting some hugs from their family and doing more connection face to face. So it shows that those things that are supportive for children do revert back later on in life. Also keep in mind skills. Here you see a picture of a baby holding a finger. That's the first developed skill as being a human. Not natural ability like swallowing or blinking. Natural ability, you reach out, grab and squeeze. Somebody in hospice, palliative care, end of life, that's also something they can still do, grab and squeeze your hands. Same with even your taste buds. As you age, they're order opposite. So for example, sweet and tart are the first flavors you can really taste. And that reverts back to when you're a senior with dementia, is sweet and tart are the last ones. So if they're not eating their meal, swap it up and start with dessert first because they need that boost of flavor in order to continue eating the rest of their meal. So that's retrogenesis. I highly recommend you researching it, even going on Google Scholar and just type in retrogenesis. Just read a few articles. It will really help with care practices. So telomeres, there's a lot of information being pumped around. I'm just going to is in your DNA, which is that X chromosome with those spiral things that we used to make with toothpicks and marshmallows in school, is are actually lengthened when people are engaged. So there's a lot of research if you're interested. Type in YouTube, just put telomeres and aging. It's pretty profound. It shows that when people are socially involved in a good quality life and engaged and have friendships and supports, their body actually slows down in aging. And for people with dementia, this is really important because if they are socially involved, their bodies are key to staying active, being able to stay independent, because cognitively they're undergoing some challenges. So a lot of research indicates that the longer your telomeres are, for people pre-dementia, it decreases your chances of dementia as well as cancer. If people are actually socially engaged, their telomeres are longer. The longer they are, the healthier you are. So I am a huge supporter of social connection for people with dementia. Socialization, programming, and engagement are key because if we keep them engaged, their bodies are actually aging at a slower rate, and we can actually help them sustain for a longer period of time. I also tell caregivers all the time, if there was a pill you could take to lengthen your telomeres, everybody would be talking about it, be on the cover of every magazine. And what our caregivers do is like engaging a resident by having a cup of coffee, socializing, sitting down and listening to a story. You're actually changing that person's DNA in a good way. And I would say that our caregivers are our medicine. They're the ones that are going in there and having a cup of coffee with a resident and listening to their stories and actually lengthening those telomeres so that their body slows down in the aging process. It also shows if you have longer telomeres, you have less pain. So things like arthritis and neuropathy can be bypassed by really lengthening those telomeres and keeping people engaged as much as possible. Here's just some 7 tips for successful engagement. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I will kick this out as a resource for anybody that wants it. But some key ones in here I want to point out is always introduce yourself. Train all of your associates to always introduce themselves. So this would be, hi, my name's Josh. I'm going to be your caregiver. By introducing yourself, you actually alleviate some of the stress for that person receiving the information with dementia, and you're going to actually see a better interaction. Same with visitors, family members. They'll come in and visit mom and say, hey, mom, and start talking, and they don't know who they are. So they want to go and say, hey, mom, it's just me, your son, Josh, your oldest son, Josh, again here for a visit. By giving that information, they're going to be more successful. Number 2 is when communicating, and this is key, get down at eye level or lower. By doing that, people are more receptive. It releases serotonin in the brain, actually helps with communication. Also, as people age, they get peripheral vision deficits, so they can't see off to the side. So by getting right in their line of vision, you can really help. A lot of families will see their loved one walk over and jump in their line of vision and get spooked and pushed away. So it's really important to walk around, walk right straight up, and get down at eye level. Give compliments. Research shows if you give a compliment to somebody, their body releases oxytocin and decreases depression. Also, research shows if you compliment somebody with dementia, that they are more likely to do what you ask in a good way. For example, one study shows that a nurse that gives medication is more successful if they have 3 social touch points that include a compliment before giving medication. So that might be, Mrs. Smith, I love your earrings. Mrs. Smith, I love your hair today. And then Mrs. Smith, I really like that shirt. Those 3 compliments spread out an hour or 2 before giving medicine, that person can be more successful in taking that medicine, especially people that resist taking medicine. Offer choice, try not to over offer. Try to just offer 2 things. So Mrs. Smith, would you like this? That goes for meals, that goes for programming, that goes for clothes. Provide the person with something to hold and manipulate. I talked about this with the loofah earlier to be able to wash. However, research shows that if you give somebody with dementia something to hold on to, they're more likely to concentrate in the moment and what's in front of them. For example, if you give a handshake to a resident and hold their hand when you talk to them, they're 33% more likely to focus on you than somebody else. So I always tell caregivers, go in for that handshake, hold it, and talk to them while you hold their hand. They're more likely to focus on you, not be distracted, so they can focus in on what you're saying. sit in a circle. I always tell people this is more for programming for all the communities that are on here. For your programming department for people with dementia, you want to make sure that everybody's a front row learner. It's incredibly easy to distract somebody with dementia, so you want to set up all your chairs in a half arc. And what that means is basically just one row where you're forcing everybody to be a front row learner. They can participate with entertainers, the program going on. In addition is that they're not being distracted. I've done this before with a few residents. I'll sit in the back of a room, auditorium seating. They have rows upon rows. And one of the residents, I can't share her name. She's not the nicest person, but I love her. She's one of my favorite people. Is she sat in the back of the room and she's like, that person has head lice. That person is not very nice. She was distracted by everybody in front of her. All we did is put her in the front row, and our behaviors went right away. So putting people in the front row as much as possible. Then always thanking the person and validating your thanks to them at the end of every program or interaction when possible. So this is safeguarding the home, and my presentation's a little bit out of order. Usually I put this towards the end, but I wanted to give you guys some tools that as you support people living at home, or even in your community, these are things to think about that might be creating some behaviors, but safeguarding and different things that you can create to have a different outcome for behaviors. So jumping right in is looking at the bathroom. The bathroom is a huge issue for falls, a huge issue for confusion and safety. So here's some useful tips and suggestions that you can implement in your communities or helping somebody at home. Number one is a contrast toilet seat. $12, you want a lime foam green or greenish color, not black, because if they can see the contrast, they can see when the lid's closed, so they don't go to the bathroom on it and have it leak and slip and fall. Or when it's open, they can see where to put their tush, so that they actually sit on the toilet and not on the floor and break a hip. Because tan on white or white on tan or white on white, hard to see, they're gonna just miss that toilet and break a hip at some point. So I always say, try to provide a contrast toilet seat. I've seen right here the glow in the dark toilet seat work really well, actually. It illuminates the bathroom, allows them to see where it is. I have had 2 residents that get a little confused about why there's a glowing toilet seat. I totally get that. So those people we don't do it for. And then in addition to that is you see the cloth one, that's about $5 on Amazon. And it's actually a cloth one that goes around the toilet seat, provides contrast. You can get the top lid and the circular lid. And this is great because people with dementia, as we age, just people in general actually, go through a process called sarcopenia, which is the thinning of tissue and flesh. So when they sit on a toilet, some people with dementia will get spooked and not want to sit on that toilet because it's cold. So this is kind of a win-win. It softens that cold blow to the tush, but in addition, is it provides contrast, which is really key. Some other things are labeling. The middle photo on the top, that's a sleep aid nightlight, $19 on Amazon. You can buy 2 of them. The color of red or yellow fosters melatonin production. So a huge issue I see for people at home or in communities, they have LED night lights, which actually LED lighting wakes people up. So it throws their circadian rhythm off and it actually makes them not sleep as well. So this sleep aid nightlight, if you put it in the bathroom, it will illuminate the bathroom so they can go in, do whatever they need to, have enough lighting. But the red fosters melatonin production, so it keeps them sleepy enough, not to fall, but to get back to bed and go right back to bed. LED lighting, oftentimes people with dementia will go to the bathroom 2-3 times a night. And what happens is they have that exposure, they don't want to sleep and it throws their whole sleep pattern off. So sleep aid nightlight is a really great alternative. There's also some really great ones that go under the bed, which I'll talk about soon. And then down at the bottom left, this is just a water sensor. I always suggest people living at home or in a community have a water sensor because so many residents will flush, either depend or put something in the toilet and overflow and create some damage. These sensors are about $5 for the alarm, or you can get them for $15 that connect to the Wi-Fi, and you can get phone alerts. So you could have one phone with 10 different devices on it, and if a toilet overflows, you get an automatic alert. You can go unplug that and make sure that it doesn't soak up a whole room. Also, you don't want the floor to be wet and have a resident slip and fall. It has a moisture sensor on it. So most of them will tell you, even if it's just really damp on the floor from a shower, and that could be another flag to say, oh, I got to go in there and just wipe it down to make sure they don't slip and fall. Focusing on the bedroom, sleep is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important. So with this is blackout curtains are fantastic for people with dementia. They really need that exposure for at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep every night. So providing more darkness is really great. Having places for people to sit for care, really, really important. So you'll see that little bench, making sure that even in the bathroom, if you're able to have somewhere for them to sit. I always encourage when people move into the communities I support that they have a few places to sit throughout that room. Um, you'll see also a sensor. Sensors are super, super cheap now, to the point where you can get a sensor that scans the entire floor of a room for 30 to 40 bucks, and it will go right to your phone. Great alternative where you have it scan the floor, that person steps out onto the floor, you get an alert, you can go check or provide support if you need to decrease that fall or that risk. Um, the bottom picture in the middle, you'll see a bunch of contrast blankets and sheets. Fantastic. I always tell people when they move into a community, bring 3 different sheet colors so we can mix match. The reason is because if you have white pillows, white blanket, white sheet, the resident doesn't see to get under that blanket, and they might sleep with a pillow halfway down their back. So you want to have contrast where the pillows are a different color than the sheets, they're a different color than the throw blanket, because that will help them navigate the bed. The last thing a lot of people say are a little juvenile, but I've seen huge success with is that top one, where you actually label the drawers with words for people in early stages of dementia. And then for people in mid stages of dementia, actually putting a picture of underwear, picture of socks, picture of shirt, picture of so on and so forth. And the reason is because they can easily identify what they're looking for and not get frustrated by going through every single cabinet. And there's more, but that's a good start for you guys. The next one is actually the kitchen. It can be extremely unsafe for people with dementia, but at the same time, there's ways to allow autonomy and then also provide places where residents do want to go. One of my suggestions is just put food out on the counter. You don't always have to put it all away in a cubby where that person has to dig through every single cubby. Just have some food or snacks on the counter at all times so they can pull it and go with it. I've seen some really great labeling actually in people's at-home kitchens or in community or facility kitchens as well, where they'll literally take a fork, double stick tape it to the drawer that the forks are in. And what they do is they actually make a visual labeling of what's in each drawer. And I've seen people be really successful with it. People living at home, a lot of times people will baby-proof or dementia-proof a home. It can cause a lot of frustration for somebody. So I always say, try to allow a few cabinets that are unlocked that they can get into, that they can get stuff that's safe. And always consider alternatives. So for example, you don't want a resident walking around with bleach or something to clean, but think of an alternative. Vinegar works really well for cleaning. Put that in a spray bottle so that person still has access to cleaning items. They can take that vinegar and spray it down and wipe down a table. So they're not feeling as restricted. They're actually being empowered in a safe way. And these are just some other additional considerations for at home. I'm just making sure time. Okay. I'm going to speed up just a little bit. We're going to skip this one, but there are great alternatives at home for finding people, tracking devices that are all very cheap right now. So the next spot is actually residential setting. A lot of places are absolutely beautiful. However, they're not very well designed for people with dementia. For example, this photo. You'll see that scatter rug, it's a tripping hazard. In addition, as it's so busy, people with dementia will get down and actually start picking stuff up off of that rug. The glass table, not very good. A fireplace and memory care, not so good. Abstract art, I like it sometimes, but not all the time. Some other key ones here is that the chairs don't have any armrests. The thing I do like is that there's a pillow on the back providing contrast. Research shows that when you select furniture for your community, you should provide contrast on the back and the bottom, because if you have 2 different colors, it actually allows the resident to see where to put their tush, so they don't sit too far back and flip the chair, or too far short and actually miss the chair altogether. And we'll talk a little bit more about color contrast soon. You also notice glaring paint or shiny wall paint isn't very good. People will actually wipe it down, or shiny hardwood floor they won't walk across because it'll look wet. And analog clocks can be incredibly confusing to people with dementia. A lot of them are actually used as an assessment tool because somebody with dementia can't draw a clock in most cases. It's just a fascinating phenomenon. Some other things too, I'm going to just throw at you because I know most of you guys are in assisted living, is personalizing the room works really, really well. One tool I'm going to give to you that's really important If you want somebody to transition to your community successfully, yes, personalize it, but also try to get them to bring the bed they've slept on for the past few months. The reason is that your body has a somatic process that it will memorize where it's. So if you can have the same bed that they've slept in, when they move to your community, it's something familiar. They're going to sleep better throughout the night and transition faster to your community. Because each time they sleep on that, it's something familiar, which will allow them to sleep. What I see a lot is people just go out and buy a new twin bed. And it's like having a brand new pair of shoes for you and I would get blisters. For them, if their body doesn't recognize it, they don't transition as fast to the community. But then also personalizing, which many of you guys most likely do. Some food for thought and research is lime green is the most prevalent color as we see as we age. So in our communities, we actually had all of our care staff go to the color lime green that decreased sundowning drastically because people with dementia can identify who to go to when they need help or assistance. You don't have to do a full green uniform. It could be a green lanyard, a green name tag, something that clearly shows who they can go to when they need help or assistance. We use lime green because it really pulls their attention to it. Also, research shows that lime green improves reading ability close to 40%. So in this research study, they did green font, gray font, black font, Arial font. They studied different sizes. People in early stages should read Arial, size 16 green. For people in mid to late stages, it should actually be lime green, Arial, and anywhere from 20 to 24 size for people in mid to late stages. Some other things for color. White is the hardest color to see. So we talked about the toilet seat, we talked about the bed sheets. Some other things is toast, for example. Those seem small. This happens all the time. Somebody will take a piece of toast if it's not on a plate. If it's on a napkin, it will look like a napkin. So they'll take that and wipe their table or wipe their face with it. It's really important to give that orientation by putting it on a plate. Also, white mini blinds. I know that so many places have white mini blinds. It's not bad, but you should definitely pull them up during the day. If you have white mini blinds with a blue sky or gray or green background, it's not enough contrast for the eye. So research actually shows that it makes people feel closed in if you just have them open, but don't have them pulled up. So research actually shows if you have a darker mini blind, like a brown mini blind, that allows contrast for what's on the other side so that you don't feel as locked in. Here too, even something as small as a bureau, white is hard to see. So if you have white knobs and a white bureau, they can't see those knobs. So make sure you're changing up the color of the knob and make sure they're successful to get into that. Okay, color and dining. So there's two colors for people that work in dementia care you should definitely know, and that's red and blue. Red actually stimulates appetite, and this has been done in a few different research studies where it provides contrast and people will eat more because white potatoes on a white plate you don't see. But red stimulates the salivation gland, makes you want to eat, also provides contrast, incredibly successful for getting people to eat more or have more food intake. Dark blue is the complete opposite. It actually suppresses appetite, especially for people with dementia. I've never used this and not had it work. If you have somebody that says, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, oftentimes, and they're not supposed to be eating as much, people put it on a small plate where they'll be like, why am I getting gypped? Or what they do is they put smaller portions and they say, why am I getting less food here? But by putting on a dark blue plate, we can suppress that appetite quite drastically. So it's a great alternative. Red improves eating habits, dark blue suppresses eating habits. Primarily, you'll want to use red, but use blue when necessary. In traditional assisted living, the other colors I'm not going to talk about, but it's actually lime green and yellow, and there's some research behind that for traditional assisted living. So here is this is called the Simmons Project. Really profound, actually. They had 10 residents that wouldn't be put on an antipsychotic or antidepressant because they wouldn't get out of bed. So what they did is they actually jacked the bed up and put black sheets on it, knowing that the color black is actually it can be perceived as scary from the kneecap down, but not from the kneecap up. And the way they did this research is they had different color balls on a table. They asked residents to grab one ball at a time and put it in a basket. 90% of them grabbed the color purple first, put it in their basket, showing they have hoarding tendencies to color purple. We could talk all about that in the psychology later. But the color black was the last color they grabbed, showing they paid the least amount of attention to black objects. So in this research study, they took black sheets, put them on the bed, raised the bed 3 inches above the kneecap so it wasn't scary, And what they did is when the resident got up to brush their teeth, they would remove all the linens that you see to the left-hand side, put them in the closet. And when the resident got out after brushing their teeth, they would look at the bed and scratch and be like, that's weird. But 8 out of those 10 residents didn't go back into bed. They actually came out and started socializing. And what research shows is that they weren't comforted to go back to bed because all the sheets were removed, so they weren't triggered to want to sleep. In addition to the color black, they just didn't pay attention to it as much. And 8 out of those 10 residents stayed out of bed for 6 months, did not need to be put on an antipsychotic or an antidepressant. And then what they did is they went to white sheets after 6 months, lowered the bed, and they remained 7 out of those 10 residents another 6 months out of bed. So a 70% success rate for a year, 80% success rate for a half a year. But it just shows that there's always non-pharmacological interventions that we can take part in to really change the behavior. Just sharing some research, there's actually something called the Green Knob Project, the National Institute for Dementia Education is doing right now. It's some pretty good success, is where you actually put green knobs on areas, on cabinets throughout the house so that is available and safe for people with dementia. What we're noticing is that there's less, if somebody feels less restricted, they actually don't wander as much. So by providing so many cabinets they can go in through that have the lime little, the handles, they're able to find what they want, like food or a bandage or whatever they want by having those and then locking the rest of the cabinet. So it's not a complete lockdown. But this is showing that the lime green really pulls their attention to those cabinets. And over time, you can remove that lime green knob and go back to an original knob. And you've actually conditioned that person to go to those cabinets where they can get stuff. Some other stuff too is circadian rhythm, which we're going to talk more about in a few slides actually. So I'm going to skip this one for now. Actually, no, I'm not going to skip because there's some good stuff. Keep in mind that we have a circadian rhythm, which is actually follows the sunrise and sunset throughout the day. And different things visually, sound-wise, and smell-wise can actually interfere with that. So for example, I did consulting work for a nursing home, and they kept, no, sorry, it was an assisted living. And they kept doing breakfast for dinner every Thursday night. And they had all these behaviors. And what we found out is because they were confused. Residents would actually go get dinner, but it was breakfast. They would think it's morning. So their body would release all these chemicals to stay awake and they wouldn't go to bed. So something as simple as having breakfast for dinner can really create some havoc. And the other ones we're going to talk briefly about in a few slides. So light dark study, we're going to just skip for now. So just get ahead. Wandering triggers. Keep in mind, there's so many things in our environment that trigger wandering. I would say car keys is a huge one. So if you have associates that have car keys, put them away. The residents will say, you can drive me home. Also coats, hats, jackets, or umbrellas, or even pocketbooks. When families bring those in, that's a visual trigger that they're from the outside world. I want to go with you. Also, when residents move in, if they have a briefcase or a duffel bag, making sure that they that we remove that immediately. And there's some other really big ones I would just want to point out. Right here, saying goodbye. When you say goodbye to somebody with dementia, they don't remember it. But they have that feeling like we talked about, the emotional brain. They say something's missing. So they go looking for it. So this research study showed the change of shift. Everybody says goodbye to residents, and they have huge behaviors at the change of every shift. They stop saying goodbye. They say, see you soon, see you tomorrow, had closure. And about 50% of those behaviors went away just by changing the wording that we use when we. So being very mindful about how we say things, especially the word goodbye. Families as well, they come in and they say, bye-bye, I'll see you later, I'll be back in a month. And what happens is, for them, they don't remember them leaving, but something's missing and it's going to be for a month. That creates a lot of angst. So can create wandering behavior. Here's just some other things for dining to give you some tools. Dignified way, instead of like a bib and napkin, you guys should really look into dining scarves. They're pretty cheap or inexpensive now. It's a scarf that wraps around buttons and covers the front hand side. This is a dignified way where you can provide choice. Mrs. Smith, would you like this one or this one? They actually keep their clothes clean, so associates don't have to keep changing them after every meal, which can increase chances of workman's comp, but also the resident who wants to be changed after every meal. So being very mindful of that. They have different styles for men and women. But the next thing over is muffin meals. I'm a huge supporter. So many residents struggle mechanically to be able to eat. So I would say you can bake everything into a muffin for those people. So it could be scrambled eggs, ham, and bacon for breakfast. Scrambled eggs is going to end up all over that person. But then the muffin meals, what you get is it's an easy tool that they can hold They can also pick it up and bite it, and they can walk around with it, and it's really tasty and yummy. We can talk about, well, hydration is a big issue in dementia care. So I always say sweet and tart are the last flavors. So doubling up on a Crystal Light packet is really great. So you and I would drink a Crystal Light packet, drink it, and not like it. But if you do two packets, if you do two packets, you would drink it and not like it. But for somebody with dementia, they need that extra burst of flavor. What you'll notice is you'll actually get them to drink more. So they should have 64 fluid ounces every day to try to foster that as much as possible. Sundowning, and we're almost done. Sundowning, we all see. I always say you should try to find out where your sundowning happens. Some people it's 2 in the afternoon, some people it's 5. Some ways for you to manage it, I'm just going to throw tools at you because we're running out of time, is pajamas. Research actually shows if caregivers put pajamas on 2 hours before the sun goes down, it works as a visual trigger to actually release melatonin in the resident and actually wind down. So even companies are really jumping on this bandwagon where they'll get uniforms that are actually pajamas that have the company logo, and they allow associates to put their pajamas on 2 hours before the sun goes down to actually be a visual trigger to that resident to start winding down to go to bed. Some other things is music. There's something called the musical breath program. It's really great. We use it in all our communities. You want to have in the morning well-known music that's to the ear, wakes you up. At mealtime, you want instrumental music that nobody knows because you don't want them eating and potentially choking or singing along. Then in the evening, you use something called non-biharmonic music, just a violin, just a cello, not a piano, that's 2 things. That simple lullaby music releases melatonin and can actually help with sleep patterns and decrease it quite drastically. Yo-Yo Ma unaccompanied is probably the best one that we've been able to use for a track. And some other things too for sundowning is building into the routines as much as possible. Physical exercise throughout the day is crucial. Different things too, like aromatherapy. I'll say there's 3 different aromas every community should have. Peppermint and spearmint in the morning wakes you up. Pine, cedarwood, or rosemary, that actually helps with cognition. Then in the evening, eucalyptus or lavender. That's going to foster something called a circadian rhythm aromatherapy. Get the full title, but it actually helps with sleep cycles because you're waking people up and having people calm down so they have that constant flow throughout the day. And also lighting. You want to limit the amount of exposure for unnatural lighting because it wakes you up, and really foster that red amberescent lighting. One of the communities I support, we actually have a lighting system that follows the sunrise and sunset throughout the day, and it actually changes throughout the whole day. So it's LED lighting during the day that transitions to amberescent colors throughout the entire community. And we see less pharmaceutical use, we see more engagement and participation, we see people more awake. So sleep is really important. So there's some tools for sundowning. And I just want to open up, I know that I talked a lot at you, but for questions and answers, if anybody has them, happy to answer. But I also wanted to share some of my contact information. Feel free, I work for the National Institute for Dementia Education as their Chief Education Officer, and then also for the Certis Institute as their Chief Research Officer. So between those two, I love answering questions. So I'm going to give you both of my emails. One is J Freitas, there's my last name, FREITAS at NID.fullwordeducation. So that's where you can contact me at NIDE. And then for Certis, it's the same J Freitas, FREITAS at, and it's Certis, CERTUS, seniorliving.com. Perfect. Okay, and I see some questions populating, so I'm gonna see if I can go ahead and answer them. And then, okay. Oh, maybe not. No, there are not questions. And then I also have my personal cell I do give to people. Just please don't abuse it and call me at 2 in the morning. But my number, if you want to text me and share information, is 508-294-4420. That's 508-294-4420. And then also from LinkedIn, if you guys ever want to connect, I love sharing our research out there and sharing with people. So I just want to say thank you guys. And I don't see any questions coming in yet. So thank you guys for your time. And I think that pretty much wraps it all up. And feel free to reach out with any questions. I'm going to try to kick out a 1-page document where all the research comes from so that you guys can do some digging on your own and implement anything that you guys feel like would benefit your community. So Thank you guys for your time.